Okay, hello. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's open session, Power Players Bringing Korea to the Global Stage. My name is Priya Dewan, and I am the founder of Gig Life Pro. I am very excited to share the stage today with three music industry professionals who come from very different backgrounds in different areas of the industry, but all have something in common. They've all helped Korean artists reach a global audience. We will begin with a panel conversation, followed by some questions at the end. Starting with Tom. Tom, you have spent pretty much all of your career as a booking agent and are currently A&R for Wasserman, which is one of the biggest global booking agencies in the world. And you've also been known throughout your career for discovering talent very early on that ends up being huge, like Billie Eilish or DPR. So when did you first start discovering and working with Korean artists?
Maybe around 10 years ago or something. I've been developing like pretty small artists since the beginning of my career. In the very beginning, I did that because those were the only ones that would work with me, because I didn't really have too much experience or a big company. But slowly it got bigger and bigger. And one of the things I started focusing on early was working with artists from other countries, because there were less agents or people that do what I do trying to sign those artists. They basically thought it was too much work to bring them over for just like a tour or something. And I thought these artists are amazing, and I want to help them, and there's an audience here for them. And first I started with artists from the UK and France and Germany and Norway and Sweden, and then just kept looking at other parts of the world, Japan, Australia, and then I guess later Korea I really started thinking about a lot and started coming here and doing things with various artists.
So who are some of the early Korean artists that you started working with, and what was it about them that you thought, okay, this would appeal to a global audience, like sound, the visual, or?
I mean, I get excited when I hear things that are unlike anything I've ever heard before. In the old days, I remember hearing this band called Jaga Jazzist from Norway, and they were just like an amazing kind of jazz electronic band that never heard anything like that before. Or the XX, sort of dancey electronic pop group. I'd never heard anything like that, and there's artists from all over the place doing stuff that's very unique, and that's what I'm personally into. And in Korea, there's a lot of things that are super unique. One of the first bands I started working with was Hyoko, and they fit into that perfectly. Like, there's nothing like them. They're amazing. They put on these incredible shows, and I was like, I really want to help you build a big audience.
Great, thanks. And then Tricia, over to you. You know, as The Orchard, as a distributor, you've helped break artists globally from so many different backgrounds and from all over the world. When did you first notice that Korean content was starting to gain traction in other markets, and how were you able to figure that out even?
Well, I think when at the Orchard, we always are looking at music that's coming from different territories. So, we've been set up in different markets and looking at opportunities for artists in different markets for a long time. But I think the first time when Korean music really got on my radar was in 2017. We started working with some acts from Korea, some things that are, that were really starting to develop a global fan base. And I think the way that we were most able to see how it was reacting is, well, we look at a lot of data as a company and are very data focused. And when you're working with something that is in a different language and you start to see spikes of happening in Latin America, for instance, you're like, what is going on here? There's something that's resonating with audiences globally, even though they don't understand the language. There's a real opportunity right here. So, and I think that's when it really first got on my radar that things were really starting to take off in a way that it wasn't just a niche audience finding it. It wasn't just the diaspora of Koreans in different markets finding it. It was expanding beyond that, and something real was going on. And we still see that kind of continue to this day, with things coming from Korea in particular, where it's just there's people listening in all kind of corners of the world that don't necessarily understand the language, but they're latching onto something in the music, and something in the artists in particular, and really buying into the artists and what they represent, and continue to follow and grow in different places.
And you mentioned Latin America, but are there any other specific markets that you've noticed have been most receptive to Korean content, and has it kind of changed over the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question whether it's changed or not. We did find in Latin America and kind of across Latin America, Brazil and Mexico, people were really sort of like early adopters and kind of would take a chance on things, even talking about, like I do sales at the Orchard, so we pitch releases into retail, and we started getting more support from DSPs in Latin America and playlist placements. So I think that those territories were really sort of early adopters, but then the United States, of course, became such an important market. And finally, it was a little bit slower to catch on, but finally did sort of break down there. And then, again, to different territories in Europe and certainly the Middle East is a really big kind of market for K-pop as well, where things just really sort of resonate there. I'd say that as far as the territories that light up and the way in which they light up, it still kind of follows that kind of trajectory. Some territories like the UK, for example, did really develop an audience for K-pop, but it was a bit slower. And also with some of the other music we work from other territories like Latin America, UK is a little bit more of a resistant territory than some. But eventually the audience does develop, and it has sort of broken down in all corners of the world at this point.
Wonderful, thanks. Han, Ultra is one of the biggest electronic music brands in the world, arguably. What got you interested in working for Ultra in Asia? Why did you get started in that path?
So one of my good friend was importing shows from US to Korea, and one of the shows that he saw was electronic music that was been coming into more of a commercial scene. So he invited me to work in his company as a artist hospitality and advancing, and then we started with Korea, and that was in 2012 when pretty much when I guess you could say EDM was becoming a very global commercial genre, and to be honest, for me, I just saw an opportunity, so I wanted to take that chance and go for it. So I think it grew very well in Asia.
Yeah, I guess you can say electronic music is a bit easier to export or travel or move around because it's not as lyric driven. But have you seen the festival across Asia kind of evolve over the years? And how is it different, or is it different in different markets, like Ultra Korea versus Ultra Bali, or?
Oh yeah, I mean, when we first started Ultra in Asia, it was just Korea first. And at that time, there was maybe 3 or 4 big EDM or electronic music festivals in Asia, like in India or Thailand, in Malaysia, and of course, if you consider Australia as well. However, now the scene has grown exponentially in the past 10 years. I think when I first attended a electronic music festival in China, it was something that I never experienced before, where how the government and the organizers and the audience were trying to put on a show where it was almost a very, very difficult situation. But like you mentioned, I think every country is very different. Even though, even for example, like Ultra is a same brand and a similar conceptually. It's a city festival that we're mainly catering towards having the event within the city. But the energy and the people, the way they even party or come to enjoy is different because it's a dance music festival. So a lot of the times, most people come to enjoy and have fun than actually come to a concert to see a specific artist perform. So I think that kind of opens up a door where it sees these just music lovers come to enjoy the music, but they notice other artists or genres. So I think that's an interesting view.
I think another reason that EDM blew up globally is because the artists themselves could afford to go to places for less money.
Yeah.
Less flights, less equipment, and to be able to say yes to an offer which gets you in front of people that have chosen to be there, or maybe not, but for people to be able to see you is a huge thing. And it's expensive for a band to go anywhere because there's a lot more flights and more equipment.
True, true. I mean, Tom, you and I have had many, many conversations about how live opportunities in North America are handled very differently to how they're handled in Asia. What were some of the early obstacles that you faced in working with Asian artists considering those differences? And also, how did you overcome them?
I mean, I feel like I'm still dealing with them today. But the business is very different. Here, one company does most of the things around the artist. And in America and the UK and a lot of other markets, it's many different companies that provide one small facet of the artist development. So as an agent, I only book the concerts. And I call up the people that have the clubs, the promoters, they have the festivals, and I negotiate on behalf of the artist. Artists from Korea and people who work with them don't understand what that means. Like, there aren't agents here. They don't do that. The promoter goes direct to them and negotiates. But from the beginning of time, the beginning of tours in America and the UK, it wasn't done that way. Also, like all these other people that do things to develop it's different. There's record companies, there's publicists, there's tour managers, there's all these different things, merch companies, and it's not integrated in the same way. So I've had to explain it, and just because I explain it doesn't mean people agree to work that way. And there are some people that will kind of do it the way artists here are used to also. I would argue that the people that do that don't end up with the best results long term, but I don't know that every artist is necessarily thinking about their long-term best results. Like, they just want to go over and play some cities, and I strive for something larger. I want my artists to have big fan bases and sell a lot of tickets and play the biggest festivals in the world. And that's a process. It's not just calling those places once and accomplishing it.
Yeah, makes total sense. And I'm glad you're going to be giving a workshop later on as well to kind of go into the nitty-gritty of what those differences are and how important it is to understand them. Tricia, music distribution and marketing also functions very differently in different markets. And given your global perspective, what were some of the obstacles that you faced in promoting and working with Korean artists and labels in trying to promote them in markets like North America or Europe?
Yeah, I mean, kind of similar to what Tom was just saying, it is very different than how things work in Korea. So like in Korea, you have your one company that's doing everything, but in different territories, you really have to tailor your campaign for that territory. and tap into the different teams that are working in that territory to really promote your music and put together those teams. So I think there were a lot of challenges. I mean, when we first started working with some artists and some labels from Korea, because it is so different, and the US for a lot of people in particular became such an important market and such a focus market. But there's just really fundamental differences to how you have to release something in the United States in order to really maximize sales. And, you know, by virtue of that, like if you're looking for a Billboard chart position, to really maximize how you're getting that Billboard chart position. Just a really simple, albeit extremely boring thing that is extremely different is timelines. Like in Korea, like, you know, a lot of these projects, the physical product is so important and fans want that product. In Korea, you know, manufacturing timelines are very tight. It's very easy to turn stock around quickly and get it out to stores. But if you're looking for global physical distribution, it's a big world out there. Even if you're just looking at the United States is a huge country. You have to start getting stock into the warehouse and shipping that all across the country to much longer time frames. And it's not time frames that we as a distributor are dictating, but it's time frames that the stores require. So if you want to get your product into Target or into Amazon, you have to follow those timelines, and they're really just so much bigger than it is in Korea. So that was definitely a challenge. And I think another thing that's just a fundamental difference is if you're really looking to, you know, at your Billboard chart position, that's a goal for you. I mean, it's a Friday release date in the US. So you want every unit to count for that week of sales, and that really varies with Korea. So if you're looking at the Korean market and you're charting in Korea, you want to release on a different day. In the US, you want to release on a different day, and it's hard to reconcile those things. So it's really sort of advising on a strategy, and for us, it was really about being a good partner and sort of, you know, we're a distributor, so we're not calling the shots. We're working with people and giving them advice, but it was just trying to be a good partner and telling people, okay, if these are your goals, this is what we need to do to hit those goals. Ultimately, it's your decision, and to Tom's point, like, you know, sometimes people take the advice and sometimes they don't. But I think over time, as you build trust with your partners and they see that what you're suggesting does work for the market, you start to build that trust, and then people start to, you know, take that advice a little bit more. But yeah, there were definitely a lot of challenges, and still are whenever we start working with somebody from Korea or any other market when they're starting to do global distribution and really prioritize markets other than their home territory.
Yeah, it makes sense, I guess, in any market that you want to grow in to really understand how that market functions. So interesting. Han, besides the festival, you guys also have a label, Connected.
Yes.
Tell us more about that. What is the idea behind Connected? What's the concept? How do you discover artists to work with?
Well, I mean, discovering artists, we go by, you know, the rosters and the artists that are inquiring to perform in Ultra and Ultra Asia, but also, you know, looking through various data. But Connected started as, you know, something that was kind of organically happened. It wasn't something that I wanted to happen, but as you know, being a promoter and seeing the music festival for our brand and other brands growing throughout Asia and globally, saw that, you know, there was a lack of Asian and Korean producers and DJs and artists that were being recognized, and, you know, it was always a battle of, you know, how to get them more exposed and trying to get them out there. And as the Asian market grew, I saw a lot of Western artists wanting to get their recognition and exposure in Asia as well. And I was just trying to help artists from different territories and regions to kind of work together to see if they could do some crossover marketing. And I saw that they were doing a pretty good job, and that was my job personally. But I felt that there is a possible chance that we could keep that into a business model, and trying to bring artists together and seeing how the artists could match or how they would be interested in working together, even though they never heard about each other or even heard their name or music. So, kind of leveraging the live event platform that we had. I wanted these artists to start to look into and find artists that they want to work with within the territory that they're going to go perform. So instead of just coming in and out and just doing their show and leaving, maybe there's more opportunities than just performance, but meeting local artists and finding out that they're way bigger or much more exciting than they previously thought. So I said, why don't we create a label where we could get different artists from different territories, and we just we create across the board of categories of what would make the artists want to work with each other, besides having them perform in Ultra together. So that's how the label came to be.
Great. And then do you find that there's obviously cultural differences, but does that affect the recording process as well, or the collaborative process? Or
to be honest, recording and the music process, no, not at all. Even the artists who are from Poland to France to Taiwan to Korea, Japan, when the artists are talking, even though they don't speak a word of each other's language, they find a way, and things come out, and some are amazing, some are interesting, some are not so good, but still, they're doing remotely, not actually meeting in the studio. So I was fascinated by that. However, the hardest part and the difficult challenge was the back end of where the contracting and then the licensing and then the management and the lawyers and all that, where these guys just want to do what they want to do, just make good music and find each other and try to cross-promote within the fans that they have within their region. But, it's harder when, they're binded or they have a contractual obligation. So, that's the hurdle that as a label or as a person who's trying to put the music out there, we try to be less taking, but just
controlling.
controlling, and then just be like, I'm open to all demands. Just let the artists do what they want to do, and then let's try to make it happen.
I started a label in the pandemic,
Yeah.
or maybe a year before. It's called Wilder, and I did it mostly to learn what it was like to put out records, because I've done one thing for so long, and I've dealt with record labels and managers for a really long time, but really didn't know what it was like to be in their shoes. And I have learned so much. It's made me, first of all, a much better agent, because I have a lot more ideas, and I can also have better questions to ask, so I can tell how things are going, or I can help in a lot of different ways. And yeah, I also learned that putting out records is a big pain in the ass, and takes a really, really long time, and I don't like dealing with the legal part. That's annoying. It takes forever. But it's been rewarding, and I've learned a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Tricia, did you have something else to add
I
to
was
that?
just saying it was really interesting what you were saying about collaborations in artists, like getting together that don't even speak the same language, but they're able to make music together. And we see that at our company all the time, and it's remarkable and it's fascinating. And it's then when the business side gets involved, where maybe it doesn't work out, but artists, they can communicate through music, and it's just so exciting. And there's so many cool things that happen now because of those opportunities, and that technology has really fostered.
Yes. I think now if this concept and this idea keeps on growing. I think because of the power of the internet and the global reach through digital world, I think more artists will be interested in just going directly to other artists that they want to work with. And I don't think anybody's really afraid to reach out, because before it was like they had to have a process in order to reach out to the artist. Before it was like, you have to go to the A&R and then management and this and that. But now, these guys are DMing them directly, and then, they're finding music, and it's just like, you just need to have the right support where people are saying, let them do what they want to do, and if it gets released, release, but if not, but still, there's something that's really great out there. It just came out very organically, so.
Yeah, it's really incredible how the internet has really made it so much easier for people, like artists even, to connect with each other and find these opportunities. And it sounds like a collaboration on the recording side is a really good sort of entry into working with artists from other markets as well, ahead of, say, touring, for example. But in touring, Tom, how do you identify which artists you want to work with? Are there certain benchmarks that you look for, or like, is there certain criteria that they have to have? Like, they have to have a distributor, or they have to have X amount of streams or followers?
I just kind of everything's a case by case. First, I need to like the music a lot. There is so much music out there, it's crazy. And there's also a lot of really amazing music too. So I feel like every day I hear something that's really incredible. And so first I got to find something I like, and then figure out who the team is. And it is really helpful when there's a team of people that are going to help. Like, I got a lot of artists that want to put out records themselves. That's kind of one of the trends of the last 5 or 10 years. And I respect that, and there's things about that are good. But having people that are actually making calls on your behalf, telling people how great you are, coming up with ideas, is also a really, really important thing. It's not easy to conquer the world by yourself. And even artists that have done it like independently, I think if you peel back the layers, there's a lot of people that are on the team that are doing very specific things, and they're very, very good at those things. So I look at the team, and I mean, honestly, I'm being more conservative about taking things on now than I was in years past. I feel like artist development is drastically changing right now in this post-pandemic world. There's so many artists out there competing against a lot of very established artists also that are pushing stuff, and that's more, the established things are more packed together than before. That used to be more spread out. I think it's harder for a new artist these days, which is making me take things on less often than I used to. I also think like competing for people's attention is incredibly difficult now. And in the old days, I would find a cool new band, get them on tour, opening for someone bigger. They'd go do that, and they'd immediately start selling 200 or 300 tickets in a city, in 10 or 15 cities, and then they'd come back 6 months later and sell 500 tickets, and it would, develop like somewhat quickly. And now I find those bands, they go and support, and they can only sell 50 tickets. And then they go support somebody else, and then they can sell 75 tickets. Development's really slow. And then you've got other artists that like just kind of blow up on TikTok or through a data thing. I don't know. It's a weird time to develop an artist.
Yeah, right. I feel like for the first time ever, you see people kind of doing a debut show at 5,000 capacity venue, which is quite shocking as well. And what about production? Like, do you kind of factor that in when you see a sort of developing artist with a crazy production or a 10-piece band?
Yeah. I mean, now, like, back then when you would do one support tour and then you'd start selling tickets, I could sort of figure out like, oh, it's going to cost them. I could ask them, how much will it cost you to come over here and play 10 shows, and I could help them figure that out. So then I'd say, okay, well, do you have that money? And as long as the answer was yes, I would know like, okay, then we're off to the races. But now you need to do that 4 or 5 times, like go support someone. So instead of needing like $20,000 or $30,000 to do a tour, you might need $100,000 or $200,000 to do 5 tours over 2 years. And the reality is like no one's really giving bands that kind of money these days. And that's one of the reasons I'm saying no, because I think it's important for artists to be in the market and be in people's faces, and they simply like don't have the resources. I've been signing more domestic artists than I had been for that very reason, because when they get an offer for $5,000 or $1,000 or something, they can find a way to make it work and go do it, but when they have an artist from someplace else, they can't. They just simply can't. And yeah, competing for people's attention and gaining momentum and maintaining momentum is like, that's the most difficult thing in the whole business. Getting something going from 0 to, really kind of moving is incredibly difficult. No one really knows how to do it. It just kind of happens. So yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah, interesting. Tricia, you've been involved with a lot of marketing. I mean, obviously marketing is one of the ways that we can build an audience that will actually go and buy tickets to a show and help artists kind of get those bigger live opportunities. What are some of the cooler or more impactful marketing campaigns you've either seen or been part of, specifically around Korean artists in the US or Europe?
That's a really good question, and to be honest, there's no one size fits all kind of model. I think it really varies by artist and what resonates with fans, and trying to think of things that have been really creative. One campaign we recently worked on with a Korean American artist, Eric Nam, was really very good. So Eric works with us, and he really sort of, leaned into really working with like the different teams in our company. And so we had like a full-scale marketing campaign that our team put together, rollout plan, and like different like online ways, like e-cards and different things like that, to really engage fans and really engage fans directly and have that communication. I think it's those kind of marketing campaigns where you're really having that direct communication. I mean, not like, sitting there in a room with them or something like that, but that direct communication with your fans that really resonates the most, because I think that's what, to Tom's point, it's really hard to build an audience now and to keep their attention. But I think people are looking for that kind of connection with an artist where you feel that they're invested in you and you invest in them back. So it's that kind of direct communication that I think tends to work the most. But there's still all kinds of like traditional marketing that people are doing as well. It still really works, just to basically start getting the word out there. Not that it is going to inspire, create a massive fan base, but press still has an impact in getting people just aware of your artist, and different radio campaigns and starting to hit different fans. Another thing that just tends to be really impactful is kind of what we were talking about before, is collaborations and working with different artists in different territories and people that can help you reach a fan base in a different market that wouldn't have been aware of you otherwise. So different things like that tend to be some of the more impactful things.
And how important is it for artists to be in the market to do some of these marketing activations? I think it's really important.
I think it's really important. Like, for an example, we were working with a K-pop act a couple of years ago, and we were looking at where there were markets with different potential for them. So we were looking at the data, and we were like, they had an unusually large audience in France. France isn't typically one of the territories that jumps up quickly to K-pop acts, you know, like there is an audience there, but it's not one of the first territories. But they were really over-indexing in France. So we're like, what happened in France? Like, what's happening with this group there? And then we did our research. It turned out they had played there a few years ago. And so because of that, they'd gotten an audience, and there was a local fan group there already, even though this was just a building K-pop band. So I do still think it's really important, because people go out there and they see you, and they feel close to you, and they experience what it's like. And we've all been to shows. You know, you sometimes relate to an artist more when you see them live. It can make you love something that maybe you weren't that into before. So I do still think it's really important to go, and I think it's important to fans and important to the market overall, because it shows that you're invested in that market, like you want to do something in that market. We see it all the time with artists from other countries that are looking to expand their audiences in Korea or in Asia. It makes such a difference when you show up, like when you actually go there. And that's when you start to see things really start to develop more in the market. And it's not just about those shows, it's about the other appearances that you can do around those shows. So like, you know, when you're in the territory, you can have promo days, talk to different newspapers and magazines or TV programs and things like that. So it's not just the shows, it's all the ways that you can also engage with the market while you're there for those shows.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like collaboration is a real theme of this conversation. And Han, you've worked with artists collaborating on the recorded side as well as, I guess, on the live side as well, bringing Asian artists to different markets in Asia and also globally through Ultra. What is some advice that you have for Korean musicians who are interested in collaborating either on the recorded side or interested in performing overseas for the first time?
Well, I mean, I think it's a two-part question, but I guess in terms of the music side, I think you have to really figure out, you know, when you're looking outside of your own territory to collaborate with other artists. I think you have to be very dedicated in finding the different artists and the different sounds that those territories or that area of artists are, you know, really brewing or getting quite popular, instead of just finding the top 10 or top 50 artists that are famous in that country or that territory and saying, I want to work with him because, you know, obviously he's famous, but really just look into an overall and really see the spectrum of the different artists that are incredibly respected in the underground scene, or, you know, within the local scene, or, you know, more in the commercial, you know, overall scene. So I think it's really just dedicating yourself to focus in that specific territory and really understanding that market as well, of, you know, what kind of you know, what genres are popular or growing, and trying to communicate and open yourself up to those people, because a lot of people, you know, have a difficulty with language barriers or just being shy as an artist or being too prideful. But I think those are the things that it's about yourself that you need to fight and overcome, to say, hey, you know, I'm not going to feel you know, fearful or you know, lose my confidence to, you know, reach out to these artists, because, you know, when you go, like I said before, when you try to find somebody like a manager or somebody who could, you know, to another a third party, it's really hard to try to really reach directly to that artist. So I think just don't be afraid and just keep on pushing, and sooner or later, to be honest, it actually does happen. So I just say, you know, the larger the market, the harder to get through, but smaller the market, I think there's more resources and possibilities. So don't always just think about going to the biggest or the best or the highest, but just find what you love and then, just keep on digging and focusing to make it happen, Yeah.
Very, very good advice. And also, I guess, don't be afraid of rejection, right?
Don't
let that slow you down.
Yeah. You have to love rejection, I think. Enjoy that.
And Tom, production, obviously you've been to events and festivals in Korea and all over the world. And I would say, in my experience, I feel like Korea has some of the highest production standards in the world. Do you have to prepare Korean artists, or how do you prepare Korean artists for touring in other markets where they may not have such a high production level? Or is there anything else that you do to kind of prepare them for touring overseas?
I mean, I try to talk to them about what it's going to be like. Sometimes they come over here beforehand, and we go to shows and venues and see what it's going to be like for them too. Yeah, I mean, I feel like for my whole career, from the beginning when I started working with international artists, I was explaining to them, well, it might be like that where you're from, but it's not like that here. And it didn't really matter where they were from. It was always like things that I had to explain that it's not going to be like that, and that's just the way it is. It's okay. But preparing people in advance so that they're not like surprised or let down or shocked it's part of it. That's why you need people on your team to help you. To explain like this is how it's done here. I mean, I'm also open-minded to like the ways people want to do things, and I've seen people be successful not just by like following the rules or whatever. But I think I'm a good sort of like translator or something of like, okay, I'm going to try and incorporate that thing that you really want, but like there's no way they're going to go for that because this is the way it is over here.
Yeah, because you take the same production basically, like DPR, for example. You'll have a very similar production in Europe, in the US, and Asia. Do they just carry that with them? Is that like something that every promoter has to kind of get on board with?
Yeah, I mean, they bring some of that stuff with them. They don't bring the sound systems and like certain visual effects or something, but a lot of it they bring with them.
And I guess having a team that travels with you, that is comfortable, also really helps kind of keep you grounded and keep you relaxed. So Tricia, what about you? What advice can you give to Korean artists who are trying to collaborate with international artists on the musical side?
Well, I think one thing that's extremely important on the collaboration side is it has to feel real, right? Like you don't want it to feel forced. It can't feel like something that, to your point of going down the list of top 10 artists in a country and putting something together like that. If it's not something that feels authentic to you as an artist, or it's just sort of like out of left field, I think fans see right through that, and also like people don't really understand it, and it doesn't resonate with people. So I think really looking for something that you're a fan of, like something that you like and something that resonates with you, and an artist that you respect and an artist that you want to work with, is kind of really the way to go about it, and just be open to that creative process and see how you work together as artists. And sometimes people work creatively together and sometimes they don't, and you have to be prepared for that. But don't always look for the biggest artist, because there could be somebody else who has a different kind of fan base that if they discover you, what you do really resonates with them, and it might not be the biggest artist in a territory, but could be an artist that has a great and loyal fan base. So just kind of keep your mind open and look for something that really feels authentic to you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And obviously everybody knows about idol music, and K-pop is very associated with idol music, but there's so many genres of music that are great in Korea that are starting like here at MUCON, right? They've got rock, you've got R&B, you've got a whole bunch of things. Tom, do you think there's any genres specifically that outside of idol music that is working really well for Korean content globally?
I mean, DPR is doing great. We have The Rose doing a huge sold-out tour right now. Yeah, I don't know. I'm open to all sorts of things, and I think I'm not alone. You know, there's a lot of people that they like to hear interesting new things. Yeah, I don't know that there's like one specific genre that I would focus on.
I mean, it's great to hear, you know, if you have any other examples of non-idol stuff like DPR that is resonating. And Hana, what about you? I know you really do electronic music as a big focus, but is there opportunities for electronic music, for example, to collaborate with other genres?
I mean, electronic music is actually in every genre, I think, these days, because so much of the music and production has the electronic part and section of it. So I think if you look at, you know, the credit list of all the famous pop songs, there is always a, you know, electronic producer or that sound that was you know, inputted into it. So it's really hard to say these days that you don't really have an electronic sound into it. I mean, if even like the latest U2 song or Coldplay, there is definitely electronic parts in it. It's really about, I guess, you know, how it's put together and mixed and mastered, and, you know, the artists are working to make it happen. But I think it's just gonna get more and more involved in production side for sure. In terms of just DJ producers, to be a solo artist to perform is a different story, but in terms of electronic music being in all facets is going to be a 100% for sure thing, yeah.
And I feel like a lot of it globally kind of falls under that umbrella of K-pop. And I think, Tricia, this is something that we kind of talk about a lot, is like these tags of world music or K-pop. Like, what are your thoughts on that and the direction it's going in?
You know I do. But I hate when things get that kind of tag and get lumped with something. The one I talk about all the time is Latin music. Like, Latin music is a genre. Like, no, it's not. It just happens to be music that, you know, fits in a bunch of different genres that happens to be spoken in Spanish. And I think there's a lot of things being lumped in with K-pop, or people want to focus on K-pop as a specific area because of, you know, things that have really blown up like BTS or Blackpink or things like that. But there is so much other music that there are opportunities for, to Tom's point. And you can see like things like DPR, there's some rock acts that do well other places. Like for us, like I think there's such an interest in Korean culture globally, and there's so much opportunity for so many different genres. Like we see all the time, like anytime a K-drama goes on Netflix, like any music that's in there, like starts to trend like right away, like all over the world. It's really incredible. Doesn't matter what genre it is or anything like that. So the fact that people are really focused on K-pop when there's so much other great music coming from the country, and so many more opportunities, and I think fans are open and fans want to hear more than just K-pop.
Absolutely. And I feel like, you know, when people look at the US, like you said, they're always looking for like the biggest thing. Like, you know, they all want to play Lollapalooza, they all want to play Coachella. Like, do you think that there's opportunities that they're missing outside of, you know, those big headline festivals? Or do you have any advice for artists, Tom, who want to play Coachella and get offered that Thursday 2 p.m. slot? Or how important is it to get on those bills?
That's not like the be-all, end-all. It's important to go and develop your own fan base and sell out smaller venues and the right venues in each market where you have fans. You can tell better today than in the old days where you have fans because there's all this data available. It's hard to tell what the data means sometimes, but you know, if there's a lot of followers in Seattle, you should definitely pay attention to that, you know, and maybe go there. It's not like there's other festivals instead of Coachella that are like the thing that you need to do instead. I booked DPR at Lollapalooza next year, and I'm extremely proud of that because because that's not something that Lollapalooza's ever done before in America. They didn't know what I was talking about, and I started talking to them about it like 2 years ago. And they didn't really listen back then. They were like, "This is K-pop, you know, like we don't do K-pop." And their eyes have been open from booking the BTS guy. That was part of it. And then I was like, look, this is different than K-pop, and these people sold 3,000 tickets in Chicago. It was the third time they played there. And these people are not going to go to Lollapalooza unless you book them. And they like to sell tickets, you know. That's the name of their business. They don't just put people on like for favors or something, or even to be cool. Everything is intentional. I think it's more important to go and play the right rooms in cities where you have fans than to like focus on, say, Coachella, and then never go back to America. I have bands that have done that, you know, and they haven't come back since, and that to me is not a definition of success. It's about having a fan base that comes out to see you, that lines up to take a picture with you or buy your vinyl or something, meet you after the show, and will stand there and sing every word. That's the goal.
Absolutely. It's a very interesting thing, the definition of success, actually, right? It's quite different for different people. What does that mean to you, Han? What do you think is successful, the definition of success in this industry for a Korean artist?
For a Korean artist.
Or I guess for any independent artist.
Yeah, I think for a artist to feel successful, like what Tom said, is to, you know, being able to, you know, interact and meet with those fans and you see them right in front of your face, not just by a number on an Instagram or, you know, on a Facebook page, but when you're out there, you actually see them with your name and, you know, maybe their head cutouts, and just, you know, really there for you. And I think, you know, maybe even though it might not be, you know, thousands of people, but, you know, just even a couple of hundred is even quite amazing. And I think an artist must see that appreciation and that gratitude of knowing that these artists that where you are performing, that probably is not from where you're from, and they are here to see you and want to connect with you is an incredible thing. And I think that's something the artists have to really appreciate. So yeah, you really have to look at it from the bottom to top than just, you know, trying to find that right slot time or that right billing or, you know, right festival or right stage. So it's just, you know, sometimes promoters get very blown away by some of these artists that you didn't expect for a turnout for, especially in a festival, because festival is just a, like, you know, it's a vast array of people looking for different genres, and then you see a certain artist that you didn't really think that there will be a much fan base there, but you see them there and then you recognize that, and then I think it opens up the eyes for the promoters and the managers and the artists themselves as well. So I think we should utilize that and try to open our eyes and not just, you know, for the billing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, you know, a few key takeaways from this conversation so far is that it's easier now, there's fewer gatekeepers, right? So it's easier for artists to kind of directly reach their fans or directly reach other artists or teams that can help them, but also that there are a lot of people working behind the scenes that are the teams. So for an independent artist just kind of building their career, what are some resources available to them, or what are things that they can kind of do on their own to get to a point where people like yourselves start paying attention to them? Tricia, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I being an artist is a full-time job. you know, as an artist, there's, you know, you want to create music, but there is a lot of competition out there. The figure came out the other day that there's 100,000 tracks being delivered to streaming services every day. So that's a lot of music, and there's a lot of great music. But how do you rise above that? And yes, there's teams that can help you and work with you, but you kind of normally have to get to a certain place before you start building those teams, or before teams can really work with you. So I think it's just really doing as much as you can. I do think that playing live is an extremely important part of that, and you know, getting in front of as many people as possible. And I think it's just also really doing what you can to engage with fans directly. Like, social media is so important, and building up, I think you really need to focus on building your audiences on the social platforms, and on, like, if you're delivering through a DIY distribution service or something, developing your followers on Spotify, just doing sort of like all the sort of things that you can do to constantly be getting in front of people. I kind of think that with everything that's happening in the industry, there's no like one, okay, this is what works to break an artist. It's just kind of all these different things that work in conjunction, that people keep seeing or discovering something about an artist that creates awareness and creates like, oh, I saw that the other day, and then I heard it on this playlist, and it just kind of creates that overall awareness. But I think just doing that and hitting as many of those different avenues to get in front of people as possible, and that also includes getting in front of the teams that you want to work with as well.
Yeah, what about you, Tom? What would you suggest?
There's so many misconceptions from artists and people in the industry about what people are going to do. I think it's on artists to do so much stuff themselves, and they're not going to find success because this one person got them on Coachella, or my manager is so-and-so and they work with some big artist, or because they get signed to a certain record label, or because they get signed to any record label. That the work, like, just gets to another level when that happens, and it's still on the artist to just work like crazy. I mean, I see this as, I'm a manager, and I work with this woman who worked on her own for over a decade, making records, booking her own tours, booking tours in Europe, mailing like cards to fans and stuff. And no one ever discovered her. And now, like, things are happening. She's got a team. There's a lot of press and stuff. And she's like, I've never had to work this hard in my life. And still, most of it is like on her. You know, she's the one who has to go and talk to the radio station and the interview and respond to the fans. And it's hard. There's like not enough hours in the day. If I was an artist, I would not rely on anyone to like do it for me. But you know, if you do get to a place where you can find someone that has experience and has like developed an artist before, that's a great thing. Just working with someone that is your biggest fan, or that you grew up with, that doesn't have experience, could work. But I always think about what has the highest chance of success. You know, what's going to give me the best batting average or something, and it's by working with people that have experience. And if you can find one, and you keep working very hard on your own and not expect that they're going to make all this stuff happen, but you do your part, you know, see what happens. Like, the main thing is about the music. It's got to connect. And that's like this sort of secret sauce, magic dust that none of us know. Like, why is it that thing, that song, that sound that connected with people? Don't know. You know, I went and saw Fred again in New York the other day. It's like this new DJ act. And it was incredible, and people were singing every single word, and he played his first show a year ago. He's going to play Madison Square Garden 6 months from now. That's huge, you know, and it's because the music's amazing, and the show was beautiful.
But probably also the energy is amazing, the artist's energy, what they're putting out themselves. Yeah. It's not like just coming out of a black box, right?
Yeah.
It's the
totally,
energy that comes from them, which is great. Well, thank you guys. I think we've run out of time for the panel conversation, but we're opening things up now for questions from the audience and online. So do we have any questions to begin with? Sure. Oh, let's put on our, sorry, one moment.
I have two questions. After pandemic, it became difficult for artists to grow in classical way. But looking at the case, Tricia told us local tours and interviews still seem to be important for overseas expansion. Well, like France case, you say?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
The case, the France case, you say.
Oh, the France
Oh, sure,
situation.
yeah.
However, it seems the surprise stars through new media such as TikTok and YouTuber appear. After all, it is necessary to combine the classical way and the new way in growth of artists.
So is it important to kind of do a mix of traditional promotion and then new promotion in some of these established markets?
I do. Some of the global platforms like TikTok are excellent way to reach a sort of global audience, and I definitely think that it's probably going to be a minute as an artist until you necessarily have the money or the investment to tour, right? So you really want to make sure that you're using those global platforms, and then that can really sort of help you reach different territories and reach people in different territories. But I do think like once you're able and once you get to a point, you've built up that fan base, like when you actually go to the market and you show that market that it's important to you and that you want to engage directly in person with the fans there, I still think that's really important. So kind of back to what I was saying before, that there's no one size fits all kind of thing. It's just all these different ways that you can reach people in as many ways as possible, I think is really important. So I do think it's very important to mix kind of the newer kind of platforms and ways of reaching people that way with the traditional, like getting out there and playing in front of people.
I mean, I guess you'd also say like it goes market by market, right? In certain markets, radio is relevant. In other markets,
absolutely.
It's not as relevant.
Yeah, in some markets, like, you don't, like a radio campaign to be crazy expensive and it's not really gonna do that much for you. I think that's why, part of the reason why it's important to have a team and a team with experience and can kind of give you that advice and steer you into like, oh my gosh, you don't want to spend that much money in that territory on a radio campaign. Like, my gosh, this is going to reach people more and actually get you more bang for your buck.
Great, thanks.
Okay, I have another question. I have two. Thomas said he wondered if a company would be successful in the long run in overseas artist work.
Sorry, a company would be successful.
제가 그냥 한국말로 질문해도 괜찮을까요?
네.
Yes, please.
그 톰이 말씀해 주시기를 한국은 한 회사가 다 총괄을 하는 게 좀 장기적으로 보면 우려가 될 수가 있다, 성공적이지 않을 수도 있다, 이렇게 말씀을 해주셨는데 그 이유가 뭐고, 뭐 개인적인 생각으로 오히려 한 회사가 하는 게 더 효과적일 수도 있지 않나, 해외 진출에는, 그런 생각이 들거든요. 좀 더 구체적으로 한 회사가 한 아티스트의 모든 업무를 총괄하면 안 되는 이유를 좀 물어볼 수 있을까요?
Okay, did you get that?
Yeah.
Did you get that, Tom?
This is the question I come up against all the time. Like the different companies that put on tours, they own and operate like specific venues and specific festivals And if you just align with one of them, you can't play the other ones. And they will put you into certain venues because it makes more sense for their business than it makes sense for the artist. An example of that would be a company who doesn't want you to play at Madison Square Garden because they make more money when you play at the arena in New Jersey. I'd say a lot of artists want to play Madison Square Garden because it's a very important sort of pinnacle moment. And there's a lot of festivals that you don't get if you just work with one company.
I think also just to add to that, you know, when you're thinking about one market, like within Korea, it may make sense for one company to do everything within this one market, but even within that company, there are different divisions that are doing different things. So there's the content division, there's the touring division, things like that. But then when you think of global, there are so many different rules and so many different specific ways that markets function that I feel like it's practically impossible for one company to be able to know how to do that really well in every city, in every country globally. Yes, please.
저는 헤럴드 경제 서병기 기자라고 하는데요. 말씀 잘 들었고요. 한국 아티스트들이 글로벌 무대에 가는데 그 좋은 팁들이 된다고 생각이 듭니다. 근데 제가 중요한 건 음악이라는 말씀도 몇 분 사이사이 하셨는데 한국 아티스트가 BTS나 블랙핑크나 뭐 카드 이런 팀들이 소위 중남미 그다음에 북미 이쪽으로 많이 진출하는 데 있어서 음악도 음악이지만 예를 들어서 어떤 가치 같은 거를 이렇게 생성해서 설파하는 아티스트들이 이제 계속 나올 수가 있는데요. 그런 부분은 글로벌 시장에서 물론 글로벌 시장이 단일 시장은 아니지만 좀 받아들이는 부분에서 어떻게 되는지 예를 들어서 빌리 아일리시가 얼마 전에 서울에서 공연을 했는데 그분이 전 세계 MZ 세대의 어떤 우울함과 뭐 이런 분노 이런 거를 대변하는 데에는 음악적 컨텐츠 내에 뭐 환경운동이나 뭐 심지어 뭐 그런 걸 겨냥하고 만든 노래도 있던데요. When the Party's Over 뭐 이런 노래는 그래서 우리나라 가수들이 아티스트들이 어떤 그런 가치들 각종 다양한 가치들을 해외 팬들한테 설파했을 때 나타나는 효과라든가 어떤 팬들과 소통했을 때 어떤 좀 좋은 점이 있을지에 대한 좀 말씀을 코멘트를 해주셨으면 고맙겠습니다.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that speaks to, you know, I think when a lot of artists do resonate with different audiences and different markets, it's because there's an authenticity to it. So you really, you know, maybe they have a message and like it seems like they seem to really believe it, and I think fans buy into that. So I do definitely think that that's a good approach. Actually, my boss was saying the other day that, you know, his son, who's a teenager, discovers music by learning what the artist stands for. So he'll hear about a stance about the environment or something that the artist has said, and then they sort of feel like, oh, you know what, that's really cool, I'm gonna listen to his music. And he actually discovers music that way, which I found really, really interesting. So I do definitely think that could be a good approach, but it can't be contrived. Like it has to be authentic to the artist. And of course, you know, you might want to engage, you know, with people who know the markets otherwise and see things that might be kind of like a no-go region that you don't want to go to in certain markets that you might not be aware of from different territories.
Great. Very, very good advice. Thank you, panelists, for all of your insights and information. I hope that everybody found this conversation very interesting and insightful. I'm so sorry we have run out of time, but if you do have any additional questions, you can just come and ask us here, maybe at the end for a few minutes. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.